everyone, and welcome to New Trials the podcast. I'm Preya.
And I'm Melanie.
The New Trials of Card Captor Sakura, Syaoran and Friends is a popular, ongoing fanfic by Wishluv, and it's based off of Clamp's Card Captor Sakura. Let's get into the podcast.
So to start things off today, I have another correction from our last episode. So we talked about the Libra card last time a little bit. And so I was curious because it was driving me nuts that I couldn't remember it. So I actually looked up the stats and everything for it. So basically, the Libra makes its first appearance in episode 36. And it's just kind of mentioned that Sakura captured it over spring break with several other cards. And then it's created into a Sakura card on episode 53. And Preya, you were correct in saying it was when she was transforming all those cards at once into Sakura cards. But here's what I think is super interesting. So in the English version, the Libra card, and I think this is why we're having trouble remembering it, the Libra card is changed to be the Cloud card while she's transforming all the cards. And so I don't know if they thought the English audience wouldn't know what Libra meant. I don't know if that was the thought process, but yeah, so that's the Libra story.
Yeah, because as much as I love Card Captor Sakura, I haven't watched it for a good 20 years. And even though it went on Netflix and it's in high quality, I just never got around to watching it because New Trials is number one in my heart.
Yes, I'm actually rewatching it right now just so I can have all the information all at once, but I haven't got to these episodes yet. But it was just making me very curious from our last discussion. And I was like, surely there's some information out there about it. And there was.
Thank goodness for the internet.
For sure.
Okay, so today we're going to be talking about Chapter 2, The Mysterious Past. It was posted in the fall of 1999, and in the New Trials timeline, it takes place in September during 8th grade. The word count is 8,242 words. Now I'll jump into the summary. Syaoran joins the 8th grade class at Seiju Junior High, and Sakura begins to notice his coldness towards her. She realizes she must get to know him all over again. Erika immediately targets him to fall under her charm, with little success. Aaron unleashes the ball, which Sakura captures with ease. Syaoran invites Sakura to read his father's books in order to uncover information of the new force. Cutting to Hong Kong, we see Meilin thinking of Syaoran and wondering if she could win him back while not being sure if she still wants to. Back in Japan, not only does Syaoran and Sakura discover that his father and her mother were partners to fight against dark forces, but that he loved her. They also found out that the last time they met, both of their youngest children were present, so therefore, Sakura and Syaoran met one another long before the 4th grade. The research puts Sakura to sleep, and Syaoran gently tucks her into bed and pockets her green hair ribbon before completing both their homework. The next morning, Sakura's tendency for tardiness rubs off on Syaoran as they race in the rain with her in Sakura's sweater and him with one umbrella for two, taking note that the two of them took note that the rain is not normal. Syaoran is greeted with a surprise at school. Meilin has now transferred back to Japan and is ready to join in the action of battling the new forces. Okay, discussion questions. Okay, before we talk about actual discussion questions, I have, about the chapter, I have to ask you, did you have any extracurricular activities when you were in high school? Because between Sakura's cheerleading and Syaoran's soccer and their catching cloud cards, it's wow, bow down to them and their time management. So did you have any extracurriculars in high school?
Oh my gosh, that's such a good question. So I've never been athletic, even though I'm very tall and I'm 5'11". Everyone always just assumes I'm this very athletic volleyball, basketball girl, but that is so far from the truth. I was very big into choir. I had a lot of choir solos. And then I also was big into theater. As mentioned earlier, I was Juliet in the school play. I also had one of the lead roles in the musical. And yeah, I think that was about it. How about you? What did you do?
I was such a bookworm. I pretty much lived in the library. I didn't really do much just outside of that. Um, and let's see. I on the side I took piano lessons, but to be honest, I just did it out of duty and less out of interest. And I think I only did it like throughout high school and I dropped it right away. And I don't remember anything to this day. But I think the first time I actually had an extracurricular activity was when I started ballroom and Latin dancing when I was in university. Yeah, I did that from 2007 to 2010. It was like such a great time. I really enjoyed that, and I went dancing 5 times a week if I could. It's and I was able to for quite a while. There was 3 different studios, and you can hop different studios in the franchise. So I had my schedule, and I was literally dancing 5 times a week. So I was definitely interested in ballroom dancing, Latin dancing, way more than piano lessons.
Didn't you say you lost like 20 pounds or something because you were dancing so much?
So all I could say is that I went from a size 6 to a size 2, which really freaked me out. And I'm like, oh, I'm not yet. It's like, because after 2 it's 0 and 0 is nothing. So, but yeah, I definitely did slim down during those years.
Yeah, and you're tiny to begin with, so I can't even imagine you be even more tinier.
Oh, but it was just so much fun dancing and just like getting lost in the music. It was a great time. So that was definitely something that I'm happy that I did when I was younger. And now my boyfriend, he used to teach swing dancing. So we've been swing dancing a few times.
I had a very brief stint as a ballroom instructor. Really, the main thing on the resume was you just need to be outgoing. And I was like, that's me. Not really. And I did it for maybe like 4 days. And they were like, you know what, sweetie? We're okay. You know what? I had a blast the 4 days that I did do it. And I really wish I would have maybe kept it up as a hobby, but I was a very poor 20-year-old at the time. So, but yeah, I had a
Yeah.
brief stint with it too.
Yeah, no, dancing is expensive. The only reason that I had to like let go of it is because I moved out and guess who I had to pay for mortgage and electricity and groceries and utilities. That's it. That's it. It's an expensive hobby.
Yeah. Hashtag adulting.
All right, so now let's get into the chapter discussion. And I one thing I noticed right away when this chapter started was how Sakura's energy completely changed when Syaoran returned. Because in the last one, she's like, "Why can't I smile anymore?" And her brother noticed that she was like withdrawn, and now she's like bounding down the stairs and she's wearing green again and she's super happy. So it's like, she feels that her life is all together again.
I love that she associates the color green with him to the point where she couldn't even wear green during the last chapter. And now she's able to wear green again. And I love that. I love color association stuff. And yeah, I just think that's so cute.
Hey, did you notice that Wish-chan wrote, taking out her hand phone, she called Kiro and told him to come to Sharon's apartment. I was like, in the corrected version on her website, she does write cell phone, but just to have this little gem sign of the time, it's kind of funny.
In true format, that went completely over my head.
I just think it's like back in the late 90s, not a lot of people had cell phones, right? So they just called them hand phones, I guess.
Yeah, I don't think I got one until high school. So it was at least 2003, 2004, I want to say. And I remember I could only call fellow T-Mobile people otherwise, because I think you only got so many free calls a day and it had to be after a certain time point. But when did you get your first cell phone? Do you remember?
Yeah, it was 2003 when I started college, and it was already a super old phone, a Motorola Razr, and it was already known to be an old phone for the times, and that's the one that I got shucked up with.
I remember when I got the T-Mobile Sidekick, I thought I was the coolest person ever because Paris Hilton had the same phone, and she was huge back in the day.
Oh,
But
simple life.
yes, but now looking back, I'm like, that is a dinosaur of a phone. Like it was humongous.
So in this chapter, we have our Lee Mei Lin making a return. What did you think of her reverting to her old personality of wanting to win Syaoran back?
I think it's a good way of just kind of, I don't know if reverting is the right word, but kind of starting over their
Mm.
story in a way. So that way, Wish Chan can kind of make it her own. And, we talked about character development last time with Eran and Erika. Like, Mei Lin goes through a whole character arc as well. And, we'll get to Wish Chan's author's note here in just a moment. But I kind of agree with her that at first I didn't really like Mei Lin too much either. Then she grows on you. But now, especially after reading New Trials, she is hands down like in my top four favorites. Well, I don't know, it's hard to pick favorites in this, but she is very high up there now. Like I love any scene having to do with her now.
Oh yeah, no, it's like when I was rereading Sharon's birthday chapter and she was doing the dance, and it's like, go Maylin, so cool.
Yes. And I like how she's pensive though, like when we first meet her back when she was still in Hong Kong of like she still loves him, but yet she acknowledges the fact that she also loves Sakura and she loves her blooming friendship with her, and so I think she's kind of conflicted in how she wants to feel. And they're eighth graders. Their emotions are going to be all over the place. So I think it's pretty fitting.
Yeah, because it's like I was trying to think about it, and what other way, like what other reason would there be for Maylin to come back to Japan? It's like, yeah, she wants to help fight the forces, but if she thinks she has another shot at Shoron, it's like, why not?
Right. Yeah, exactly. So one thing I wanted to bring up about the chapter is Eran has a very specific quote that I wanted to run by you. So the quote in the chapter is later they'll have to face those forces 10 times more powerful than the objects. Will they be able to overcome misery, heartbreak, pain, anger, and hate? So this is the first time the emotion cards are even mentioned in the story.
Correct.
And so, up to this part, I think we can understand that misery is probably alluding to the despair.
Mm-hmm.
And then anger is probably alluding to the wrath,
Yes.
which I would think hate would go along with wrath as well, I would think.
Mm-hmm.
But then the only other ones he doesn't mention that we have that he just talked about in his quote here was he never mentions the jealousy or the pride.
Well, I think in this case, maybe he's um because I didn't read the chapter, I was listening to your audio. Were they in capitals or was he just talking about them as emotions?
Oh, that's a good point. They are not capitalized.
Okay, so I think what he meant is that these emotion cards, they're going to unleash those feelings.
Oh,
Because
okay.
you remember Aaron when he was under the jealousy, he turned into a monster.
Yes. Yes. Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and it's funny that you mentioned that because I wanted to highlight um a quote from Ryren. Oh, that's how I'm going to pronounce Sharon's father's name, by the way, Ryren. I don't know how you pronounce it, but I'm going to pronounce it as Ryren. So the diary foreshadows the series when Ryren wrote, each trial gets more difficult. They started out with attacking with simple objects, but now I feel my soul being ripped apart.
Yes, I actually wrote down the same thing to discuss with you.
And like, I think that has to allude to the plague.
Oh, that makes sense. Or I was thinking, there's that painting that Sheen does later on in the series where the sword is pointed at her neck and they're both kind of crying about it because I think it's mentioned that a betrayal of some sort happens too. So
Yeah.
I don't know an emotion that leads to the betrayal happening, but that's kind of what I was thinking about too. But the plague also makes 100% sense.
Yeah, because that's what ended up killing Ryuren and Nadeshiko, the fact that they had to seal it in the body. That's what caused Miara's blindness.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yes.
Hmm.
So between the plague and the phantom, like didn't do them any favors either. And we saw like what kind of what kind of havoc the phantom wreaked with our current cast.
Right. Yeah, that's another good arc that we'll get to later that I'm excited to talk about.
So it's like even though the phantom is not an emotion, he definitely like woke up those emotions, whether it be like Tomoyo, um, and whoever like it was trying to attack.
Yes. Yeah, that's one of some of my favorite scenes of even though they're like heavy scenes, that's some of my favorite scenes, especially when he's trying to get Syaoran and Syaoran doesn't budge. And then even though Tomeo doesn't have powers, the only way he can get her is by crystallizing her heart, which I think is just I just love Tomeo.
Oh, I can't wait to get to that. I remember the scene where she's like, Phantom San, and she was like being all polite to it. It was really cute.
Yeah. Only our Tomeo would be polite to a series.
Yeah. Okay, so to get back to this chapter, I think it's really interesting that so we in canon, and we know that Wish-chan is very dedicated to canon. There's no way to reinvent the fact that Nadeshiko was like 16 years old when she met Fujitaka. So that
Mhm.
means that she needed to have a love story before she turned 16-year-old. So she's like so the fact that she was already so young when she met Fujitaka, it's amazing that Wish-chan was able to write a love story that takes place before that.
Yeah, and it's such a sweeping romance too. And I remember when I first read New Trials, that was another thing that just kind of drew me to it right away because I was just obsessed with the fact that their parents were in love with each other. And to me, it just made so much sense at the same time of why that would be. It didn't just seem like a story thing just to like toss in there. It really does make sense, especially once we get into the whole curse of the Great Five. You know, how Lee and Amia, I'm still trying to figure out how to say it. I think it's Amia, how, you know, they're never meant to be together. And so I was just
Yeah.
obsessed with the fact she made them a couple.
Now, what do you remember of the Byron and Nishiko relationship? Because I was surprised that he's never told her that he loved her. And I thought that they thought each other as each other's first loves. Is that like was Chan rewriting things in the future? Did they actually confess their feelings to each other? Because I remember that Ryan gave Nadeshiko the ring as a gift, but do you remember any like love confessions between the two of them?
So I'm rereading Arc 4 now, and the scene where he gives her the ring is for a Christmas gift one year. And Miara and all them are teasing her because they're like, it's an engagement ring. And Adeska's like, no, 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 it's not. And so if I remember correctly, I don't think there's ever a confession. I think it's kind of like how Sakura and Shaoran's relationship is right now, where it's very much they're devoted to one another and it's kind of obvious they love each other, but I don't believe an actual confession ever happens.
Typical
Or
like parents like children.
yes, actually I take that back. I think Nadesco might have confessed to him, I believe. I will find this out and it'll be in our next correction on next episode. But I don't think he ever says it back to her. But I'll double check on this.
Now, the next morning when they were going to school, did you notice that the umbrella that they were using was green?
Ah, do you think it's the same umbrella that keeps making an appearance in the story?
I just know it's the same umbrella. In my heart, I know it's the same umbrella. It starts with chapter 2 and it's just gonna keep on going to when they reunite and when Sakura forgets and everything. It's gonna be the same umbrella. I just know it.
Yes, yes. I also love the fact that she restored Toya's power. I think that's super interesting. And we'll get to this later on in the story, but I love the fact that he has powers because that way he can be a part of the alliance as well, which I think just adds on like a whole new level to Sakura's magical alliance to have her brother in that regard. I think is just so interesting.
I think I was like, I never thought of it before, but when she was 10 years old or 11 years old and she was just transforming the Clo cards into Sakura cards, she needed all of her energy to just like sustain the cards. But now that she's 14, I think she can like it, I think it's a sign that she can do both. So she can sustain Yue on her own star power, and that leaves Tuya to have his own power again. I don't know if Wish Chan was thinking that far, but like I'd like to headcanon that.
Well, I think also it's kind of foreshadowing in a way too, because it shows that powers can be regenerated. And we learn later on that, Sakura's star energy gets regenerated, but back in Shadon. So I think, I don't know if she meant it to be this way at the time, but to me, it's kind of foreshadowing because it kind of shows the audience that, hey, powers can come back even though they're transferred.
Oh, that's so amazing. It's like I'm already itching to get to arc four, but we're enjoying the journey. We respect the origins. We'll take it one chapter at a time.
Yes, yes.
Do you have anything else to say about the chapter specifically before we move on to the Dark Forces?
A couple other things I wanted to bring up is I love the fact that he steals her green ribbon. I
Yes.
think it's the sweetest thing ever. And that becomes very prevalent throughout the series of he says it's become his lucky green ribbon. There's a couple times where Sakura almost sees it. And so I just love that it kind of comes back again and again. And again, it just kind of proves what we talked about during our first episode of the boy is so very much in love with her still, no matter what he says.
He is.
And then the other thing was we are reading Ryuren's diary right now. Remind me, how did that diary get out of the dragon realm and into the real world? Like, is that mentioned somewhere? I'm on the dragon arc right now in my reread. So I might be able to answer this more correctly here pretty soon, but
Honestly, the only answer I can think about is magic. There's some magical artifacts are just there in the right place, the right time.
yes. Yeah. And hey, that is a completely valid answer.
Okay, so we have a new dark force introduced in this chapter called the ball. Now, it may be silly, but to anyone who's played dodgeball knows that balls are not meant to be messed around with.
It cracks me up so much that that's the way people don't remember the sports. They just get knocked out. Like all these people just get concussions.
Yes, it's very convenient, very, very convenient. Uh, so
Coming from a that works in the medical field, I'm like, these balls are probably hitting them on like the back of the head. That's probably going to mess with their vision long term.
just don't think too hard. Don't think too hard. As long as we don't see the magic when it happens, we're all good. So Sakura, she uses the shield, the time, and the windy to capture the ball, and I love the mentions of our OGs.
Yes.
And unlike the knife, I think the ball actually comes back in the series. And I could be wrong, but I think this is what Sakura uses to conjure a basketball for the Kai versus Aki game in Arc 4.
Yes, I was going to mention that to you. I haven't got to that chapter yet in my reread, but when I was doing the audiobook version of this, I kind of had a mental note of that. So yes, I believe you're correct.
And did you notice that the mirror makes an appearance in this chapter too?
Oh yes, she sends the mirror over to her house while she goes over to Syaoran's.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember it. Like if you ask me in Charles trivia, it's like how many times did the mirror pop up? I would have never remembered this.
Yes, and you know, going back to the original OG anime, I just love any and all scenes involving Toya and the mirror. I just think it's so cute.
Was there any fan arts of this chapter that popped out for you? For me, my favorite has to be So Peaceful by Draguroke, aka Sebastian from the group. It's the one where Sakura is sleeping and Syaoran is doing her homework. It's just such a pretty fan art.
You'll have to send that to me.
Yes.
And by the way, y'all, I made a Instagram page for this where we're going to be uploading fan arts too, so you can see what we're talking about.
Do you have any favorites from this chapter?
Fan art wise, I probably should have looked at it more closely, but the only one I can think of off the top of my head, and I cannot think of who drew it, I'm so sorry, but it's kind of like a doshinji style for this chapter of Sakura sitting on the floor and Syaoran's like across from her.
Yeah, I know that one. That's a recent submission. I can tell you who it is right now. That's by Dream Follower, and she's also a member of the group. And this
Yes.
was yes. This was actually shared in April 2020, and it's really cute because Sharon is in the background and Sakura's in the foreground, but we see her back and we see Kiro in the immediate front foreground, and we see his back, and it's a really interesting perspective of the scene.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The one that kind of sticks out in my head for it.
It's a really nice one too.
Well, shall I read the author's note?
Please go ahead.
So author, she's still calling herself author fall, winter 1999. So Mei Lin came back. I feel sorry for her since many people make her as such an evil character. I know people mean no harm, but still I feel sorry for her. I used to hate her, but now I think she is an interesting character. She's not that bad. I plan to make her not so bad. Also, isn't the past very weird? It may be confusing, but it'll clear up later. The CCS crew would continue on next chapter. By the way, the better ideas will come on later on in the story. And then Wish Chan edited this one as well in August 2012. Chapter 2, The Mysterious Past, version 2.0 here. Chapter construction was much simpler in Arc 1. The chapter was a mess. I'm feeling very ashamed for my sheer number of typos and errors here. And this chapter, everyone came together, and I remember writing it and feeling rather possessed when I was writing Ryuren's journal entry. After the beginning, this editing process, I was relieved, somewhat surprised to find that it seems like I haven't strayed too far from the original version I had on New Trials, especially now as things come to a full circle in Arc 4.
Oh, I like how she's like mentioning Maylin, and she's like promising of new idea, like the good ideas are coming, guys. I just have to put everything together. But we're like, this is so precious. We love it. Don't apologize for anything, Miss Chan.
Mm-hmm. And I love the fact that she didn't make Maylin the trope villain either. I just think that's fantastic. And that's another thing I remember really liking about this too.
Yeah, Maylin becomes like just to have her own arc and her relationship with Kai and to come into her own as like Syaoran's protector in the future. But it's such a fascinating arc, and I'm really excited that Maylin gets to be mixed in with the rest of the gang.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it makes me giggle when she says she was rather possessed when writing Libra Yorin's journal entry.
I would have never expected that from her. It's like she's really put herself in another person's shoes, a dead person.
Well, and especially from a male perspective too, an older male perspective too, I think it's pretty good.
Yeah, I think it's very convenient that it had all those burn marks and missing missing areas. Well, I guess that wraps up for the third episode of New Trials the podcast. Thank you for listening to New Trials the podcast, where it must rain for there to be a rainbow.
You've been listening to New Trials the podcast. Please be sure to check us out anywhere you can find podcasts such as Anchor and Spotify. We are still working on the Apple version, so please bear with us on that. Also, be sure to check out the original fan fiction that you can find on fanfiction.net or Wish Chan's own personal site at wishluv.com/newtrials. We also now have a Gmail account. Please be sure to email us at ntthepod@gmail.com if you have any chapter-specific questions. Please be sure if it is a chapter-specific question that you do reach out to us within a week's time, so that way we have time in order to answer your question. Be sure to check us out next week when we discuss Chapter 3 of Ghosts, Statues, and Quarrels.